Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the Bill of Rights. Last lesson we talked about the Constitution and the fact that it was ratified or approved finally by all 13 states. Some people that did sign the Constitution were not excited about everything that was written. Remember, they had just fought this war against Britain, and many of the things that they fought the war about weren't even mentioned in the Constitution. Things like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, no quartering of soldiers. Remember, we talked about how much they hated having the soldiers knock on their door and say, "Hey, I'm spending the night with y'all tonight." Wrongful imprisonment, things like this. These were freedoms and rights that the colonists had fought the war for against Britain, and there was no mention of them in the Constitution. One of the most outspoken advocates for this freedom list of rights was George Mason. George Mason was from Virginia, and he was a leader during the American Revolution. He was a member of the Virginia General Assembly from 1775 to 1781, and he was now a delegate to the Constitutional Convention in 1787. Mason felt that all of these rights should be expressly written in the Constitution. James Madison really listened to what he had to say and then carefully picked up his pen and started writing down amendments or additions to the Constitution. The new amendments became known as the Bill of Rights. They're the first 10 amendments. And these 10 promises or freedoms were based on George Mason's Virginia Declaration of Rights and Thomas Jefferson's Virginia Statute for Religious Freedoms. We have been over what's in the Bill of Rights before in class, but let me just quickly go through the amendments. Amendment 1 gives us 5 freedoms. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, and freedom of petition. Basically, we have the right to pray as we see fit and to say what we want. Remember, we have to know when it's appropriate to say what we're going to say. Newspapers and books can print their opinions, and we can meet in public to discuss things. The Second Amendment was the right to bear arms. In the 1700s, well-trained militia was a must. We had to have that. So this amendment gives us the power to own guns to defend ourselves. The Third Amendment was the no quartering of soldiers. Homeowners may not be forced to house or feed soldiers in their homes. The Fourth Amendment is protection from illegal search and seizure. So your house, your person, your car cannot be searched and taken away from you without due process. If you're 16 and you're driving around town, a police officer cannot stop you and search your car without probable cause. Now, probable cause could be seeing alcohol in the car, or a firearm, or smelling something that he or she should not be smelling in the car. That would give them probable cause. The Fifth Amendment, you hear people say, "I plead the Fifth." It gives you the right, as someone accused, not to further incriminate yourself. You don't have to testify against yourself. You can have a lawyer help you figure out what to say and what not to say. The Sixth Amendment, people deserve a fair and speedy trial. No secret trials are allowed. You have the right to be present at the trial. You have the right to face the person that's accusing you of the crime. All of this is done with your knowledge. The Seventh Amendment, disputes over money or property will be settled with a trial by jury. So if you're being sued for a certain amount of money, you can have a jury of your peers decide your guilt or innocence. Amendment 8, prisoners can't be tortured or treated badly. The punishment has to fit the crime. You're not going to get the death penalty for having a bunch of speeding tickets. You're not going to be held on $1 million bail because you went 100 miles an hour in a 60-mile-per-hour zone, things like that. The Ninth Amendment, the Bill of Rights realizes that it can't list all the rights that you have in the world, but rights that are not promised in the Constitution to the state or federal government are left to the people. For example, you have the right to get up in the morning and choose what you're going to have for breakfast, or what you're going to wear to school that day. The 10th Amendment, the federal government has limits on their powers, and whatever powers are limited are left to the states to decide. The Bill of Rights was added to the Constitution in 1791, and unfortunately this wasn't the end to all of our issues. There was one big problem that was still on the table, and it was the problem of slavery. A lot of states had started to say, you know what, this slavery thing, it's not good, and we should put it in the Constitution that we should end slavery. Well, remember, you needed so many states to agree, and a behind-the-scenes deal was made between a few northern states and a few southern states. The southern states would allow trade laws that would make it easier for northern states to have big shipping industries and trade with other countries. In exchange, the northern states would allow the importation of slaves, the slave ships coming in, to last for at least another 20 years. So that was something that was tabled or shelved in the Constitution so that it would be approved. As we know, in about 50, 60 years, the issue of slavery is going to be one of the things that takes our country to a civil war. I wanted to quickly read a quote from George Mason about his opinion on not having these freedoms listed. George Mason said, quote, "Upon the most mature consideration I was capable of, and from motives sincere patriotism, I was under the necessity of refusing my signature as one of the Virginia delegates, and drew up some general objections which I intended to offer by way of protest. After the patrons of this new plan found they had decided majority in their favor, which was obtained by a compromise between the eastern and two southern states to permit and latter to continue the importation of slaves for 20-odd years, a more favorite object with them than the liberty and happiness of the people." So George Mason went on record saying that he understands why these things happened, but he doesn't think that they were right. And a lot of delegates, whether they were, and remember, George Mason owned slaves, but a lot of these delegates wanted people to be aware of this backroom deal that was made between the northern and southern states. This sheet in your packet is called Protecting Our Rights. If you just go through and mark which amendment in the Bill of Rights they're referring to, it's not a difficult assignment to do. You can take a screenshot of your work and send it to me by email. You can put it in the Dropbox on View, or you can take this if it's easier for you. Some of you, it's easier if you open a Word document and type your answers out. Number 1, Amendment 2, or whatever it is. I'm not going to give you any answers, and so on and so forth. Next week, we're going to start talking about new territories that were added to the United States as the United States expands past the Mississippi River. All right, guys, have a great weekend, and I will see you with 2 more videos next week. Take care. Bye.